Welcome to History Bites. My name is Bonnie Yisman. We're happy to have you all here today to hear this talk. So today's talk, let's get started. And I just want to take a moment before we get into the talk itself to acknowledge that this is the traditional homeland of the Nipmuc and the Wakamtuk people. They were in Amherst before Amherst was Amherst. This is their land and they have their stories, and of course we honor their people. But 300 years ago and maybe 8,000 years ago, we had the forest that is the topic for today's talk. And this is going to be a really fun event because I couldn't do the walks. We had walks going through the forest, but Elisa is going to tell us about the walks and tell us more about the forest that we have right here in town. So I'm going to turn it over.
Thank you. Yeah, I first want to thank the Amherst Historical Society for taking an interest in this forest. I've been aware of it and thinking about it and trying to get people interested for about 20 years. And every now and then, there would be some little flurry of interest from a few people, and a couple of faculty members or some grad students or whatever. And then it would die down, and then something else would happen, whatever. So last year, when the Historical Society was co-sponsor of a presentation about old trees by an expert that was given at Amherst College, it was co-sponsored the conservation and tree warden and stuff like that. And so of course I went, and it was a lovely spring day. We were standing outside before we went into the Congress Hall to hear the talk. And I said to George and to Gigi, who's not here, and probably to Amy, who isn't here either right now, did you know that there are genuine old trees at UMass Amherst? And they said no, but they got interested, unlike the administration at the university. So anyway, that led to the walks, and I will mention those. This is a picture of part of the forest from down below on North Pleasant Street, looking up, like, cut out the dorms and stuff, in, like the early 2000s, in the fall, obviously. And that's the other half, because I didn't want to do a big panorama and you couldn't see that much of it anyway. So that's what it looked like to me, it's prime. In the fall, different species of trees turn different colors in the fall. And the hemlocks and pines, of course, stayed green. It was fabulous. It's not as fabulous now because too many of the hemlocks have died. Anyway, here's a couple of UMass pictures. They sometimes like to put it in the background of their official pictures. But anyway, that gives you a sense, if you're on North Pleasant going north, it's on your right up the hill. The phone tower up there. The hawks love that tower. They sit up there and keep an eye out for little things that they can pounce on. Anyway, so I worked for about 20 years in Letterly Graduate Research Center, which is the concrete building at that end of North Pleasant Street, before you go around the Rotary. I had to think for a minute about calling it. Anyway, and was taking walks at noon with other people who worked near there and went to walk at noon. And I realized after a while that there were trails that went into this forest up there. And so on days where the weather was nice and they weren't available for walking our usual route, I started walking up there. And at some point, I was enjoying the birds and the trees and being out of the office and all that. And then at some point I stopped to, I don't know what, listen to a bird or catch my breath or something. And I looked at the tree next to me and I said, that's a very old tree. I had been on old growth walks led by Bob Leverett. And I said, that bark is an ancient oak. So I got interested and started paying attention to where I was walking, not just, walking and hearing birds and stuff. So I started going up there at other times. These are some pictures from probably 2005, 2007. I didn't date them, but approximately then For one thing, we got snow then. But anyway, just, you know, taking pictures of the woods and enjoying it, and started talking it up to people. I also, at that point, thank goodness to Nick Grabby, I was writing columns once a month for the Amherst Bulletin. So some of my columns I devoted to this forest. And I've been leading hikes in other places for the Sierra Club. So I started offering to lead walks, and, you know, people came and we went on walks on Saturdays or Sundays when you could easily park on campus and stuff like that. And some people on the faculty, et cetera, did get interested. So in 2005, Bill Wilson, who was in the forestry department, if I remember correctly, right, taught dendrology, he was part of a group that came with Joe and Wendy Larson. And there's Wendy over there looking at a tree. I didn't have to get Joe in a picture. I'm not much for taking pictures of people.
Is that the Joe Larson?
That is the Joe Larson of Preserve UMass fame, and et cetera. And they came, and Bill did some measuring of some trees. That happens to be one of the very few beech trees up there. It's not a place with a lot of beech trees, but other trees. And, you know, they got interested in trying to think about what might be done. 2 years later, Bob Leverett came out. He measured the biggest black birch tree that I was aware of. He and his wife came on actual New Year's Day, and they didn't have much time, but he measured the tree. And in here somewhere I have how big the tree was. He said the girth was 8.8 feet, which is 8 feet 9.6 inches, and the height was 82.7 feet. And he said it is definitely worth tracking. This tree is one of the big ones in Massachusetts.
Oh.
I don't think anyone is tracking it, but, you know, it'd be great to measure it again. In the meantime, Tony D'Amato, who was a graduate student at that point at UMass and had been doing old tree work with Bob Leverett and his work on that issue, had come up with me and had taken cores from 5 trees. I got to see how much work it is to get a core out of a big old tree, a lot. Anyway, so the white oak that I happen to stand next to, because it happens to be right next to the trail, two black birches, because at that point there were 2 big old black birches next to each other. One of them has died, and 2 hemlocks. The black birch trees were, at that time in 2005, 134 and 145 years old, so I had 20. The younger one unfortunately died. One hemlock was 192 years old. I don't remember which hemlock, so I don't know if it's one of the ones that died. The white oak was, as Tony put it, a whopping 281 years old. So you add 20 to that, and it is at least 300 years old. The fact is, when you put a core into a tree, you don't really get to the very first year. You know? There have to be enough rings to start adding up to something. Anyway, so they were definitely old trees. And in April of 2006, Tony gave the 2 cores he still had, a couple of them got lost, he gave the ones he had to the UMass Library Archives. And so I presume they are still there. So, Joe, being Joe Larson, he began to think about things that could be done. In the meantime, I got on the Arboretum committee and was talking about this and trying to get them interested and whatever. And apparently, most people on the Arboretum committees don't care about anything that just grew, only about things that got planted, especially if they're from somewhere else. So that didn't get me very far. However, there were some individuals who did. Pam Munn was in physical plant then. I don't know if she's still there. She and some of her staff got interested, must have been from her, and they went up and they took down the huge grapevine that had been draped all over the black birch tree, and it is still clear of grapevine. which is a good thing because that kind of thing can get real heavy and pull down a tree. And I did actually schedule a walk to go up there with the Arboretum Committee, but nobody came. Nobody. So, anyway, but Joe was by this point becoming quite expert at figuring out how to preserve things at UMass from the administration's indifference or hostility, and founded with others Preserve UMass, and was pursuing registering buildings, etc., with the Mass Historical Commission. And he knew how to do that. He got the idea in March 2009, got the idea that we could submit Prexy's Ridge. It's called Prexy's Ridge because at the southern end of it was where they built the president's house, which is now the chancellor's house. Anyway, that we could submit that. So in March of 2009, Richard Nathorst, and I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, is that right? And I spent some time in the archives doing research and stuff. Joe did most of it. He had gone to the Jones Library and gotten archive maps, information, and all kinds of other stuff, and steered us through the preparation of Form H, which is what you send to the Mass Historical Commission. And I'm not going to continue showing pages. When I lead the walks, I have a printed out copy that people can pass around and read if they want. But anyway, in February of 2010, he received the official notice from the Mass Historical Commission that had been declared on the inventory of historic and archaeological assets of the Commonwealth. So it is an official place, and it should be possible to prevent any construction or whatever on it. Not on the orchard next door, but that, anyway. They said, in its current condition, the form says, in its current condition, it is living evidence of an ecosystem succession that occurred across Massachusetts forests following the chestnut blight. This site is further unique in that here post-blight succession has occurred with minimal human disturbance. And various maps, etc., have shown that the land was regarded as forest or woodland park useful for class use in forestry education. Unfortunately, it is not being used that way, but it could be. So, well, I should have shown you that slide while I was telling you that. Anyway, so clearly, this is actually a Google map thing. You can see the forest during not when the deciduous trees don't have their leaves on. So that's mostly what, the evergreens. Over on the topo map, you can see that the height is up here, and then it slopes down this way. But all of the green is part of the forest, although there are buildings on some of it, etc., from the previous construction. And over here is what used to be the orchard, and now is orchard and pavilion future.
It seems to me there's a topo going down the other side. That's only half the ridge.
Well, that's in the orchard.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was an orchard.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I used to pick plums in.
What?
But the historical paper that you have,
Mhm.
declaring it whatever,
Mhm.
that does not include that other, that
Doesn't
piece.
include the orchard, no, because it's not undisturbed. And in fact, it became, according to, I'm about to go show some maps and stuff, it was used that way early on. That was not a,
Right.
post-World War II event or anything like that. Okay, so the earliest map we had was from 1833. And the hill we're interested in is here. This is Strong Street,
Oh.
East Pleasant Street, North Pleasant Street. I don't know that I knew that East Pleasant and Strong were all there in 1833, but
Oh, yeah.
anyway, Mass Aggie 1870. And in this case, I could try to use my cursor, but this is easier. Forest. But you can see that already down the hill the other way, it was already not forest. And may well not have been forest when UMass got it. I mean, it could have been an orchard or whatever at the time.
Is the curvy line the stream that's right in the middle? No, keep going up.
Yes?
No, keep going up. And now go to the left. No, go down.
Oh.
Now go,
Oh, here.
yeah, is that the stream?
Well, I'm confused by that because that's not the way the creek runs from the campus pond now.
Yeah, but this is 1870.
I know, and they did make a campus pond shortly after that. But I'm personally not aware of a stream that runs toward Hadley directly west from the campus
It's underground.
center, and it could be
It is
underground.
underground, yeah, it goes up, it goes
Didn't
and
we
it
have
ends
a
up, goes
talk
through
a
the
few
parking lot,
months
where the
ago?
parking
I was thinking the
spaces are.
same
So
Yeah.
it does go
Okay,
straight
okay.
I
west.
think we had a talk a couple of times ago about when they made the Hot Brook and how it.
Well, but the pond, yeah, the pond, I mean, I'll have some pictures of the
Yeah.
pond or whatever, but the stream from the pond now goes through downtown Amherst,
And it's
mostly
underground partially, yeah.
yes, and then comes out near, behind the Lord Jeff, kind of,
Yeah.
and goes out, yeah. So that stream does not appear, I mean, I don't understand, this makes it look like one stream, you know? I don't think that's accurate, there's not a loop. The stream's gotta go one way or the other, it
Yeah.
doesn't, so,
Interesting.
yeah. Maybe there were two streams that started about the same place, and one went south and one went west, I don't know. I mean, I know the campus center becomes a stream when we get a heavy rain, you know.
They did talk about that. I wish I remember who the person was that gave us the talk, we could ask them.
Yeah, right. Well, maybe 3 this morning you wake
Yeah,
up.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, 1901. Another map with more buildings and stuff. Over on the right, in the, you know, approximately the same location as before, it says Chestnut Forest.
Oh, the chestnut.
So the assumption is that that meant it was at least 1/3 chestnut trees, which would not have been unusual then, because that was predominant tree in the eastern forests before the blight, which was started shortly after 1901, unfortunately, and, you know, within about 20 years wiped out most of the chestnuts. There's still some sprouts that come up from the roots there, as there are elsewhere, like on the Holyoke Range and stuff, but anyway. But, and then beyond that, it says Old Orchard, right? Here, Chestnut Forest, Old Orchard. Vineyard, Old Vineyard,
Fascinating.
you know. So it had been agricultural there, you know, down the hill toward the east. Whether anybody ever knows what they did with the limes, you know, did they make wine in Amherst or just make grape jelly? I don't know.
Before Prohibition.
Yeah, that's true. Whether, well, who knows what kind of grapes. Anyway, 1907, this map is oriented a different way. This is north in this map because it's basically an Amherst map that I cropped. And the forest is approximately where the Mass part of Massachusetts is. But that begins to look like a familiar streetscape probably to many of you. Some pictures, the president's house up there, or the chancellor's house behind the greenhouses. And you can see there's plenty of trees. And there was a botanic museum, and I think that building was still standing and had faculty offices in it
On the second floor.
on the second floor until sometime in the 70s.
I think there was a fire.
That's right.
Where was it, where the chancellor's house is now?
No, I think it's currently not used for a building. It might be the parking lot where, for the health center or something like that, approximately there. Kathy, do you remember where Guy had his office? Because I think I went into the front of that building looks familiar to me. But, and it could be that there was just another building that looked like that, I don't know. But in any event, you can see that there's a wooded hill behind it, which is the point of including this. I had fun looking at images from the UMass archives. This has been a great rabbit hole for me. This is, somebody went up in the tower of the chapel and took a photograph looking east toward the campus in 1913. You can see by then there's a pond.
Ah,
They're looking over the pond, and, you know, the building, I should know the name of that building and I'm blanking on it. It's still there. It's not French, maybe it is French.
Fergal?
Anyway,
Worcester Dining Hall?
oh, long before Worcester Dining Hall.
Yeah, but in front of what's
Well,
Worcester.
Is that the?
Depends what you mean by front.
I mean,
Yeah, across the street from, yeah, yeah.
Is
Sorry?
it the East Experiment Station?
No, I got one of those,
Okay.
yeah. There we go.
Ah,
The East Experiment Station is still there,
Yeah,
That's
it's
in
been
the same,
on-
in the place where it was built.
Oh,
1913.
Yeah, and the hill behind it, and now, you know, Worcester Dining Common, et cetera, have obliterated the view, but not the trees. Nor did they take down East Experiment like they tried to with West Experiment. Joe said that too. They had to move it.
But he missed out on the trolley.
He missed, that was, yeah,
Trolley stop.
yeah, I think that was his learning thing, where he learned what you have to do early enough to, yeah. Rope pole, 1915, that was a tradition for a long time. I think it was freshmen versus sophomores to see who could pull who across, into and across the pond. But anyway, I put it in here because among the pictures that show the wooded hill, that's usually the rope pole pictures, because everybody took pictures of the rope pole. And then Mass Aggie in 1919, and at this point, open field, pasture, grass, commercial orchard, blackberries, grass, strawberries, variety apple orchard, plums, vineyard, old woods on steep slope.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. I never know with these whether they're actually exactly what was on the ground or whether it was a plan for what they thought they were gonna do, you know.
yeah.
But anyhow. And 1935, woods, orchard. Surprises me to see a row of pine trees there. They're not there now. Seems like a strange place to have a row of pine trees through your vineyard and your orchard.
Could have been in some sort of experiment, do you think, the
Could
pine
be.
trees survived?
I did ask the archivist people at the library if they had records of how the place was used, and they don't really, unfortunately. Or at least not easily findable.
Right.
You know, they gave me links to like all the annual reports or something, but you know, you try to search on words you hope are keywords. I wasn't really gonna read every one, but anyway. And so, anyhow, as a result of that conversation before the presentation last Arbor Day a year ago, we decided that we would organize some walks to look at the forest. And we did those in the fall. They were limited to 12 participants each because you can't walk around the woods and have a conversation with a big group of people. And we scheduled, I think originally we scheduled 2, and they filled up immediately. And so we scheduled a third, and this photo is from one of the participants in the third walk that we did as a fill-up. And we're gonna do another one in June, probably June 8th. So if you're interested, you can keep your eye open to when the Historical Society announces it, because you have to register, and it costs, what, 10 or 15 bucks, because it's partly a fundraiser for the Historical Society and maintaining their sycamore trees and, you know, stuff like that. But anyway, so that's me next to the big old oak. What happens is as the tree gets older, the bark starts doing weird things. That's not what a white oak, I mean, many of you have seen big old white oaks in pastures, you know, and stuff like that. First of all, they spread out like this because they got lots of room. But the bark doesn't look like that. But as it gets older, changes happen as the tree gets bigger and the bark has to accommodate and stuff. And at some point, I don't know exactly when, it gets those huge ridges. And then apparently after a while, it starts to lose the ridges, the lower down. I don't know. I mean, I've only seen 1 or 2 trees that look like this, but it's definitely a white oak. And that's the one that, you know, is 300 years old.
Yeah, that's surprising,
Yeah,
because the bark is very different.
right.
than
I've actually had
the tree.
arguments with people about whether it's a white oak or not until,
Well, that's because it looks very much like a black oak with the deep
Yeah.
furrows.
right, but it isn't.
Yeah, I believe
Yeah,
you, I believe
right,
you,
yeah.
I believe you.
Right, I know, because we think of black oaks as
We
having
don't
that
have-
knobby bark.
They don't
Yeah.
have many pictures of old white oaks like that.
Yeah, no, because there aren't very many. You know, I mean, it seems to me, I'm hesitant to call this area, quote, old growth, because I'm not sure that there was never any cutting at all. But it clearly was never cut down, you know. I don't know what they did when the chestnuts died,
Oh,
you know? But, so,
Well, it still has old growth trees.
it has very old trees and they
Even
look,
though
yeah.
the whole area is not old growth,
Right.
there's still old growth
Yeah,
trees there.
so, I mean, that's clearly, whatever we call it, it's an old tree. Yes.
I mean, anything
And-
over 280 years.
Right, right, so, but, it, you know, it seems to me that at least for a while, Mass Aggie probably heated their buildings with wood.
oh, yeah.
I don't know when they switched to coal. But, you know, the wood was readily available. Now, they also probably had plenty of wood lower down. This is a steep slope, so there was probably wood that they could get that wasn't so hard to get. And they could, you know, clear an area and it's gonna be our future, you know, strawberry patch or whatever. In the meantime, we'll use them, but I don't know. Like, people didn't write those kinds of things down, unfortunately. Anyhow. This is the black birch. That's, what did I say, 145 plus 20, 165 years old. And 87, whatever it is, feet tall. I don't know, you can see me down there. And there was another one near it, but as I say, it has died, and part of it is still visible, but it is rapidly falling apart. That is near the old observatory, you know, the thing with the dome on it, and the edge of the woods toward the orchard. No, not that near the orchard. I was relieved to see that the building for the pavilion is actually, you know, 100, 200 feet downhill into the orchard from here. This is that old white oak. And I'm actually in that picture too. I don't know, between my size and the dappled light, it's hard to see me. But for scale, here I am.
Just about to see it.
Yeah.
Huge.
It's hard to get a picture of that tree.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I was out there a couple of weeks ago. I go on weekends when I can park without getting, you know. And it was just a fabulously glorious evening. One of the especially after all the rain we've had this spring, you know, so I just kept taking pictures. But I made a blow up of this topo just to show this is down toward the down the hill toward the northern end. It just happened to be where I got that look with some of the early trees starting to leaf out. Now, there are a significant number of non-native plants in there, but I didn't totally believe what my app on my phone was telling me things were in several cases. But anyway, so I'm not sure about that thing that's in green, because I get very suspicious of the first things that leaf out, because that tends to be what invasives do. Leaf out, like the Norway maples now all have leaves, but the sugar maples are just starting. You know, that's part of how they get to be invasive, but anyway. And here's some more in the woods down in that lowland part. They don't have so many big trees. There are some big trees, mostly oaks, but not so many. And we saw some trilliums, which is very nice. I have not seen those in other parts, but it could be that I wasn't there at the right time, or it wasn't quite the right place. You know, in this particular situation, a trail goes right past them.
Yeah, they're out now, actually.
Yeah, right. But I mean, I haven't walked all over you know, I haven't bushwhacked all over the place there.
It just came out
Yeah,
recently.
right. Some photos I took of bark. I realized as I was putting this together, it's not like I did any kind of real, you know, study of let's take a picture of every kind of tree that's up there. So I didn't. But black birch tends to have this curly. This is a more exaggerated version of it than many, but it has these big plates that kind of curl around. That one my app said is a black cherry, and I find that plausible. Pignut hickory.
Excuse me.
This was identified as a chinkapin oak, which I find believable. That other one, the ID said it's a Shumard oak, which I've never heard of. But I looked up, it is a genuine oak, but it isn't listed as living in Massachusetts. So ID could be wrong. It could be one that somehow, you know, got there, got planted, or, you know, somebody had an acorn or something. I don't know. You know, we could get everybody's plant app and go up and see if any of them have any other ideas. But anyway, among the trees, I don't have photos of the bark. Well, actually, I should go back for a second here. Some of the trees in this part of the forest are tamarack or American larch, and there's a few black locust. Either of which maybe was planted, although black locust tends to spread pretty well. But those of you who know where the Hitchcock Center used to be, where the common school is now, Large-Hill. Yeah, I mean, you can plant those trees and they grow here, but I don't think they tend to spread naturally and not that far. My theory is that the hurricane of '38 probably took out some trees, and maybe somebody planted larches there afterward. You know, in previous years, I've read things about the hurricane here, and I've not seen any mention of this, because of course, everybody had more immediate concerns about the tree that fell on their house, or the town common losing all its elms and, you know, stuff like that, so.
Are those larches still pretty healthy?
It's hard to tell, because of course they lose their needles in the winter, and they were starting to green up. So, to my totally inexpert eye, they appeared okay.
The ones over Hitchcock.
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't been over to the common school area for a
Well,
while.
that's what I meant, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. You think they are? Yeah. I don't know what.
Yeah, well, they wouldn't be bearing fruit if they weren't healthy.
Okay.
And they are, so.
I don't know what age
It's the ones I
they
saw.
get to be. Yeah. Anyway, what I did not find in my, rummaging around in my old photos, pictures of all the kinds of trees that are up there. One of the most common, not surprisingly, is red maple, and I just didn't take a picture of them. There's also red oak and black oak, mostly down toward the northern end, but not completely. There's a few sugar maples that are quite old, but not very many. One beech tree that we know of, and then the white pine and the American hemlocks, which are suffering. This is a different white oak at a time when somebody was apparently studying it at tape around it. The hop hornbeam, it's normally a tree about this big.
Yeah, that's huge.
It's a slow-growing relative of oaks. And this one, as you can see, and using my hiking pole as size, is quite large. Going along the side, there's a remnant of a fence that used to be the edge of the woods versus the orchard, and it's near the fence. And when I go out and try to find it, I always have trouble because I forget exactly where, but it's, a good bit of the way down the slope. But you can see the orchard over there. The woods have gone beyond the fence at this point. And this was a tree where I tried, another tree had hit it as it fell, and so I tried to capture some of the damage to the bark, but it was hard to do. Not very good photos of it, but the overall wood still looks pretty nice. That obviously is not a spring picture, but unfortunately, the hemlocks are really suffering. Many of them, the crown is bare, they're dead. Some of them have some foliage up on top. I find that not too encouraging because I also walk at Buffum Falls in Pelham, and they had big hemlocks, some of which seem to have survived the Adelgid scale plague and have put on a lot of growth up at the top. And at least 6 or 8 of them have broken in the last couple of years. When a wind hits them, their trunks apparently don't have the strength to bend with the wind, and so they snap off. Yeah. So I have not seen as much of that here, although there are some that snapped off, and there's some others that blew over. One of the puzzles in terms of whether it's quote old growth is we think of that as tending to have pits and mounds because it was never, like plowed. And so when a tree falls over and pulls up its roots, it makes a pit, and then there are mounds as it decomposes. This place does not have a lot of visible pits and mounds, but one tree that fell over recently, we realized looking at it that in fact it pulled up very little dirt because the roots don't go down very far. They have to go out because it's all rock under there. And so maybe that's partly why. The other factor is the major use of this place is mountain biking. And those folks, as they will, have made pits and mounds for their own entertainment. I don't like it, but I don't quite see how one would stop it. I think in and of themselves, the bikers are not as on their bikes, are not really hurting the trees, they very much, but not the last time I was out there, but a time before that, this spring, as we were coming back up the hill toward the observatory to walk down to where we parked, there were 2 guys sitting in a chair with a fire. And that was a very windy day. And we looked at each other and decided we weren't going to try to tell them to put it out because we didn't think that would work. But we said, don't let that fire get out of control. Oh, we won't, we've got water. But that is my biggest fear for this forest now, is that someone will be enjoying a campfire and it will get out of control. And I don't know, I don't have good ideas. I mean, first of all, the administration has never had any particular interest in this place. They're now leaving it alone. But even if someone wanted to put out a fire, how would they get water there? Yeah, I mean, there's the little pond in the area there next to Eastland Lane, but, you know, I don't think you could run fire hoses from Orchard Hill, dorms, maybe, but, you know, I mean, really, and it's really, I think, quite worrying, but I don't, if.
You don't think the mountain bikes would hurt it with the roots and stuff?
Well, I think they've done whatever
Already.
damage they're gonna do.
Yeah.
They've got trails kind of like all over,
The place.
insane jumps,
Oh.
you know, where they've dug a hole and made, you know, log embankments,
That
so
would damage a
I was
tree.
told,
Where
you
you
know,
know,
I was informed that was probably so they could jump from one to the other over the,
gotta be able to do that.
But didn't the administration a few years ago come in and try to level everything? I think they made more damage. There were tracks everywhere, and, you know, they
Well,
widened everything, and it just.
I don't know, if they did do that, it's not apparent now.
Right, because, yeah, now it's reserved back
I
to the
mean,
little bike
You know, one
house.
thing about mountain bikers, they're strong,
Oh,
and they're motivated, and frankly, many of them don't care what they do to the environment as long as they're having fun, you know. So, but, like I say, I don't know what to do about the fire danger and stuff like that, which I think is the worst part of it. Anyway, that's what the hemlocks looked like a while ago, and that's looking up at them, at some of them now. So, and I don't think there's much we can do about that either, unfortunately. It adds to the dry wood that could burn, I'm sorry to say, but the birds, it's good for the woodpeckers, I will say.
But you wondered, the removal of all that dead fuel at some point.
Well, the thing is, normal woods has lots of dead fuel in it. So, you know,
That's
I wouldn't want to recommend anybody go in there with, you know,
Dig it out.
yeah. So, let's see, that's the end of that, but we've had pretty good conversation anyway, but does anybody have any other thoughts or questions or comments or whatever? Anyway, like I said, I'm really happy to talk about this place.
I wonder
Yeah.
if you'll extend your research to town, to other parts of Amherst for Oak Grove?
Well, I'm not really a researcher, I'm totally an amateur.
No, I mean like that. yeah.
But I am not aware, I mean, there are certainly individual old trees. I don't think we have any other old growth, you know, never cut woods in Amherst. Now, if someone knows of some, I'd be happy to see it, but, you know, it's basically very agricultural, some small industry. I think most of the Holyoke Range was used as woodlots, you know, the part that's in our town. There are probably some places that were so wet or whatever that they didn't cut. But again, many of those had hemlocks and they've died. So, but I do think it's interesting if people know, you know, around here of other places that there's some reason to think, you know, real reason to think haven't been cut, that'd be good to pursue, but, yeah. I'm 78, I'm not really gonna.
There's some huge old, I don't know if they're old grown, but they're enormous trees. I always could maybe talk to Bob Leverett about looking at it, but down Shutesbury Road goes up to Pratt Corner. That, off to the right there there's a huge forest, and right along the stream, there's some enormous trees. And that's a pretty wooded spot, that's probably not been cut
Yeah.
over.
Yeah, I don't know, I mean, it's worth looking into, I think. But like at Buffum Falls over in Pelham, that area was farmed. People tried to farm that in addition to using the water power from every little stream that ran through. You know, so it's amazing what people attempted to farm, you know, when that was the principal way of making a living. And of course, for many of them, it didn't make a living. And they headed west, given, you know. So I don't know, it's possible, but.
I mean, Wildwood Cemetery, that's the north part of campus, right?
Well, Wildwood Cemetery was converted into a cemetery by Mr. Austin Dickens mostly and his buddies. I don't know exactly what it is. I assume it was probably woods at the time they started, so, and they have some woods that they don't manicure, you know, that slopes east. Yes, I don't know. I mean, the biggest trees that I'm aware of there are the ones that are in the cemetery. And the trick about big trees is they grow faster when they have room and they get, you know, and they don't have neighbors crowding them and they have dirt to grow in instead of just a little bit of dirt and a lot of rock, you know, and stuff. So, you know, it's worth pursuing that. I think the Wildwood Cemetery people are pretty avid about protecting their environment, and I would guess that they've investigated the history of the place. You know, but
Lisa, do you know what the designation for, as a historic site or historic place? Do you know if there are other forests that are so designated?
I don't know. I am pretty sure there isn't any other major state research university that owns one, though. And you would think
Yeah.
that they would see that as a
Right,
feather in our cap.
yeah, yeah. Especially as an agricultural history.
Yeah, yeah. That's what we thought. You know, look at that, we're special, we have this forest, you know?
But they have a few state champion trees on campus.
Of the planted ones, yes, right. And, I mean, I'm not against a Chinese elm next to South College or something, but I don't resonate with it as much as I do to something that actually grew here.
But the arborists who labeled every tree on campus, I think even the natural ones, they're aware of stuff, because there's a huge, what do you call it, large leaf magnolia right up on East Pleasant, kind of where that gate is where you go down into the orchard. And I mentioned that to Todd Conover, and he said, oh yeah, we know about that.
Okay.
Well, because it's getting viney, you know, stuff's growing all over it, and, but he said that's a town tree, so.
Oh,
But they knew it was there, and,
okay. Well, if they have actually cataloged the ones in Prexy, I don't know where that information is.
so on that tree map, those aren't at all labeled, the campus tree map.
Well, not the last time I looked at it, which I admit was not.
I
Yeah.
thought.
But Guy Lanza had, well, there was an adjunct professor who was running a class that Guy was involved with students going out there and measuring and supposedly doing GIS and stuff, and that's probably what that yellow tape around that one white oak was. But the data got lost. The guy, not Guy Lanza, but the person who was supervising this class as an adjunct had a job and kind of dropped off the face of the earth, and the data disappeared, which is such a tragedy because however much the students had done, I don't know how much it was, that disappeared. So, anyway.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much.
And some of you I may see on a walk.
Yay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against